Please welcome Consulting Chief Technology Officer Mandiant and Program Committee Chair mWISE, Charles Carmakal.
Good morning, everybody. Organizations often get beat up after major cybersecurity events. But today, I want to focus on the silver linings and some of the opportunities that organizations live through after a major security event as they try to regain trust and rebuild security environments and really improve their security posture moving forward. It might sound counterintuitive, but some of the most secure organizations out there have had a major cybersecurity event in the past. Sometimes it's a major one. When I think about some of the most secure organizations out there, they've been targeted over and over and over again by some of the most advanced adversaries. And they've had to leverage the learnings from those incidents to help them better defend their networks. And so today I'm really excited by the panel that we have because we're going to learn from some incredible security leaders that were able to rebuild security programs, better defend their environments, and share those learnings with you after major security events. And so please join me in welcoming Tim Brown from SolarWinds, Jason Manar from Kaseya, Lisa Sotto from Hunton, and Adam Tice from Colonial Pipeline. Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. And I think you'll agree that we've got an incredible group of leaders that have lived through some very interesting and very notable cybersecurity events. And so really maybe just to start things off and to level set, just so we all understand who's represented here on today's panel. Tim, could I ask you to introduce yourself and just talk briefly about your security event?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tim Brown here. So I was running security before, during, and after the SolarWinds event. So I've been there for about 5 years. And, for folks that don't remember the SolarWinds event, I think many do. One of the things that, so originally what we had thought that we had affected 18,000 people downloaded our code. And it started with a call from Kevin Mandiant to our Kevin Thompson. And then the next call was Charles to me. And what Charles was able to really tell us is what happened, right? He was able to show us code. So normally with an incident, you have to do investigation. You have to determine, hey, what happened? And the amount of information that came from the folks said, yes, it did happen. And we were able to figure out, what versions were affected. We were able to figure out a great deal of information during the time. And then for the next few months, we went through, a recovery. And we'll spend some time talking about that as we go through.
Excellent. Jason?
My name's Jason Manar. I spent 16 years in the FBI, working probably over 1,000 different cyber incidents that really gave me a holistic view of the good, the bad, the ugly, things that Fortune 100 companies were doing right, what they were doing wrong, all the way down to what mom and pop organizations were doing right and wrong. And so I took that information and went over the private sector with Kaseya. I am now their CISO and have been there for a little over a year now. I have the unique perspective of working in the FBI when they actually went through their incident back in July. It was July 2nd, and it affected 57 on-prem RMM customers. And very quickly, because of the collaboration with Mandiant and the visibility that the FBI already had, when we got the TTPs and IOCs, we were able to see that it was related to an investigation that we had that was a lengthy investigation. And and here I am.
Great, thank you. How about you, Lisa?
All right. I'm Lisa Sotto. I chair the Global Cybersecurity and Privacy Practice at Hunton Andrews Kurth. I am a lawyer. And I had the really great privilege of representing Colonial Pipeline in connection with its incident. My job as counsel is to protect the legal posture of a company from the start. And we work with companies at the beginning of incidents to assist in trying to protect privilege and legal protections. So we work with companies to hire forensic investigation assistants like Mandiant, ransomware negotiators when needed. We also liaise with government officials, whether regulators or law enforcement. And as a general matter, we help to orchestrate what is a multi-headed hydra. Incidents have many, many work streams going at once, and somebody needs to be there to pull these things, these work streams together to make sure that everybody is operating with the same set of facts and making decisions, however imperfect, because we are dealing with imperfect facts every step of the way, but making sure that everybody is dealing with the same set of facts.
Excellent. And Adam?
Good morning, everyone. I apologize in advance. My voice is suffering a little, so bear with me. I'm the CISO at Colonial Pipeline. I joined in February of last year, or no, of this year, February of 2022. I'm much like, I think, most of you in that I had no idea what Colonial Pipeline was until May of last year, when the ransomware affected Colonial Pipeline and ultimately resulted in the shutting down of the pipeline. Not because of the ransomware itself. We're very proud that the defense is held and OT was not affected. But just out of precaution, the fact that the decision was made to take the pipeline down, a demonstration of the company's commitment to operating the pipeline safely. As you can imagine, since May of last year, there's been a lot of change. We got a lot of help from some amazing partners like Mandiant and Hunton and others. But it's been an amazing journey, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. Really appreciate that, Adam. All right, so I want to start talking about the most impactful security initiatives that you all launched after your security events. And so, Tim, if I could just start with you. You guys launched a Secure by Design program and initiative that helped organizations and yourself better protect your software development as well as to protect the environments that you guys build code in. Can you talk a bit about that and share what some of the learnings and successes were?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you look at, there were so many things going on during an incident, right? So many different remediations that you're doing. Getting help was first things, right? So our legal partner, we were just talking about, our legal partner was DLA Piper. They came in and really acted as a good quarterback for us. But with our Secure by Design initiative, we had streams of work going on from multiple parties, right? I like the Hydra comment because that's a good way to think about it. So you have an engineering stream, you have an IT stream, you have a security stream, you have marketing streams and others. So our first focus was customers, right? 100% customers. If we had answered every piece of misinformation that the press was talking about at that point in time, no, we did not fix the election, our offices were not raided, all of those things were coming in the press. And we actually had to ignore press for a little bit, right? And say, what do? We focus on getting the customers right. Part of that was to define the Secure by Design program. So Secure by Design really encompasses a number of different things. From engineering, we said, okay, how do we be exemplary in what we do as opposed to just building code? So our new process really takes builds, and in our instance, the source code was not changed, source code control system was not changed, but the end result was changed. So somewhere in the middle, the code being changed, that's why we termed it a supply chain attack to start with. So the attackers actually attacked a transient virtual machine that was part of the build process. So first step of Secure by Design from a build perspective was how do we make sure source code matches what we produce? That was builds after January 25th essentially do a two-way. They start from source code, they go through, we get a product, we decompile that product, check it back to source code. Step two was create a whole new build system external to our environment, make it all ephemeral, so short-lived, make it all in code. That was kind of step two of the improvement to the build process. Step three was multiple build pipelines. So we build multiple times. We have a developer pipeline, a staging pipeline, a production pipeline, each one having fewer and fewer people being able to do it, touch it. So therefore, then we connect these, and before we ship, we do the 3 builds, we compare the results between them, and you now need collusion among multiple people to affect our build. We open source that. So essentially, for IT, it was look over everything from a inspection perspective. So we had inspection partners, threat hunt partners in our mix for about 5 months, examined every line of code that was checked in for 2 years, really did a lot of things from the investigation part. From the security team perspective, we made a number of changes there. I ran my own SOC before the incident. Now I have 3. So I have CrowdStrike SOC, I have SecureWorks SOC, I have my own SOC, then I have Low and Slow from KPMG Forensics. So I'm looking for visibility across the environment. Went from a part-time red team to a full-time red team. All of these things are encompassed by Secure by Design, and what we've been doing is talking about that a lot with different companies and trying to educate others on how they can get better.
So Tim, one thing you shared with me in the past is that after the event, you basically told your engineers that you cannot design any new features, any new functionality, but you've got to focus on the core products and improving cybersecurity. How did you manage to convince a team of engineers that are so eager to build new code and build new functionality to focus on cyber for 6 months? Yeah,
so for 6 months, that's all we did. We didn't ship a new feature for 6 months. So I had somewhere around 400 engineers working on security, and that's what they were working on. So that is new build systems for 50 products takes time, takes effort. A common repository for everything takes time, takes effort. And we pushed hard for 6 months in order to really get everything right. So motivation at the beginning was easy, right? Somebody broke into their house and changed their code. So they were mad, right? They were like, this is unacceptable. We're going to do anything to make sure that this doesn't happen again. It starts waning a little bit, and then probably about 6 months is the max that we're going to get. So great motivation to start with, and then shifting off into features a little bit later worked pretty well for us. But yeah, it was a push for 6 months, but it really did, a focus on security for that long really did give us a great baseline to move forward from.
So next I want to move over to Adam. Adam, Colonial Pipeline had one of the most impactful security events that the mainstream became aware of, because people struggled to get gas, or gas prices went up, or there was a perception of the struggle. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the most important and most impactful security initiatives that you launched after the event?
Sure. And just a caveat, right? My mission, my business is a bit different than Tim and Jason's, right? We move 100 million gallons of product every day. It's not an insignificant amount of highly flammable material, which could have a major environmental or ecological impact if we don't do it properly. So that safety culture is embedded into everything we do. And our security initiatives reflect that, right? Because we need to keep the pipeline up running safely and securely. So really what we spent our time on following the event, and you can imagine, we did the same things any one of you would do following a ransomware event, right? Resiliency, identity, making sure that single sign-on and multi-factor have been implemented everywhere, getting our arms around the vulnerability management problem, the asset inventory problem. But for now, with us, what we're looking for is how do we ensure that the pipeline is going to continue to execute safely and securely? The political climate of the world right now has highlighted that the transportation of energy is a pretty big deal, right? We've seen pipelines targeted, and not just through cyber, but through traditional physical or kinetic effects. So for us, that convergence of cyber and physical, it sort of reminds me of the 90s, right? It's coming back to be a real thing where we need to be aware of what's happening on the pipeline at any given point, whether it's in an OT piece of equipment that that's running some obscure operating system that's hard to patch, hard to replace, or a piece of pipe sticking out of the ground somewhere that might represent a target to someone. Having that holistic visibility across the board is really where we're spending the bulk of our time right now.
Got it, excellent. So Jason, maybe I'll ask you, what was the most important security initiative or the most impactful security initiative that you launched?
Yeah, so anytime I'm at any of these conferences, I think about nuggets or takeaways that you guys could potentially take away immediately and enact almost tomorrow in your own organization. And when I think about that in answering this question, I would say cybersecurity champions. Cybersecurity champions because I can put cybersecurity champions in every corner of the organization, whether that's DevOps, engineering, whether that's even product, sales. And I have cybersecurity champions that I am training, that I am educating on security best practices, that are also responsible in the point of contacts within that organizational entity. And that alone is huge. It's huge on several different fronts. First and foremost, buy-in. You have people within the organization that are learning in almost real time how important security is, that are able to talk to their peers. Number two, information. Because although we put all kinds of security tools and stacks in place to understand our environment, I find that no one understands the environment more than the people that are in it, that breathe it every single day. And I know that based off of those 1,000 intrusions that I worked before, because 9 out of 10 CISOs that I would talk to almost all knew the vector in which they were intruded upon. Whether it was Joe that had clicked on malicious link 5 different times during some type of phishing campaign, whether it was a known security vulnerability that hadn't been properly categorized or ranked based upon the risk. And having these individuals in different organizational entities throughout the company breaks down silos of information. It breaks down communication silos. It is truly a one team, one fight. And I think if there's anything that I would really tell each and every one of you to kind of look into doing is something like that, that empowers people to take personal responsibility for cybersecurity.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, it's so important to get support from the business to keep the mission going. It's not just a cybersecurity problem that security and technology folks have to address. It's really business leaders across the company. So Lisa, if I could point to you, you've advised probably thousands of organizations following a security incident on how to manage their risk and minimize their liability. And as you think about how organizations are transforming their security programs, what kind of advice do you give to them to help them better manage their liability and better protect themselves?
I would start by saying make friends with your lawyer. We have your back, right? That's our job, is to try to maximize the protections that are available to companies, and that is what we do. We work to protect your legal posture every step of the way. One of the questions that we're always asked after an event is, should we get a report? The answer to that may be no. Do you really need a report? Because if we have a report, we tend to have a fight over privilege with respect to that report, even if we retain the forensic investigation firm under privilege. There's always a fight. So if you don't need it, chances are good you probably shouldn't be getting it. You may need a report to give to your customers, to give to your business partners. If so, understand that you'll waive privilege on that report, and that's a decision that the company has made. And if you get a report, the one very key recommendation is not to put recommendations for safeguards for enhancements in that report. Separate a recommendations report from an incident response report. I'll also note that after every big event, we do a postmortem, and what we want to know is, did you have the right? And these guys are in charge of the technical aspects. My charge are the organizational aspects of security. So did you have the right policies and procedures in place? Did you have a good incident response plan? Did your incident response team know their roles and responsibilities? Did they know what to do? Did they dive in quickly? Did they know each other? Tabletop exercises, that's a good thing. Did you have a ransomware protocol? Do you need one now? Because we're always looking to improve. Did you have the right cyber insurance? So those are the types of questions that we look to ask. And so, and I'll just end by saying, always work at the direction of counsel, because we really are trying to cloak a lot of what we do in privilege. Facts are never privileged, and there are things like pen tests that won't be privileged. Those are organizational measures that are not for the purpose of advising counsel to provide more effective legal advice. But a lot of what we do can, in fact, be cloaked in privilege, but we can't do that if we don't try from the start.
Yeah, really good advice. So next, I want to focus on company culture and what organizations can do to really change after a security event. And I'll start off with Adam. And Adam, I'm not going to ask you about Colonial Pipeline. I'm going to ask you about your time at Equifax, because I think something that I heard that was really interesting following the Equifax security incident is that you guys defined KPIs, or cybersecurity KPIs, that were baked into employees' compensation. So can you talk a bit about that? What worked, what didn't work, and would you recommend other organizations doing something like that?
Yeah, sure. I'll answer that in two ways. The first way is internally to Equifax culture. If you lived through the events of 2017 as an Equifax employee, that was a very traumatic time. Let's be honest. And I used this with Charles last week at a different conference. We tend to eat our own in cyber, right? We're hardest on each other, especially in light of a major event. And that happened, right? That happened at the Equifaxes of the world, where people come out of the woodwork and attack the Equifax employees, attack the Equifax security team, attack Equifax culture, simply because they happen to be victims. And you think about it, we don't do that in most other cases. Why are we going after the victims in this case and making their lives miserable? And I'm not saying that to make anyone feel sorry for you at Equifax. What I'm saying is that the events of 2017 delivered a message to every Equifax employee that was, security is important. Security is something we have to commit to. Security has to be baked into what we do. The KPIs that Jamil, the CISO at Equifax, introduced was one more commitment to demonstrating internally that we were doing the right thing, but the buy-in was there. I mean, the security team, the technology team, just Equifax culture had bought in, and they were rallying around the events of 2017. It was a good, really, thing to see and be a part of. Where I really believe the KPIs came into play is in rebuilding trust with our customers and your average consumer, right? Dedicating resources to metrics that measured our overall maturity, that showed the world that we were committed to doing the right thing, that we were going to rebuild this and we were going to rebuild it back securely, was, I think, the master stroke there with the KPIs, because it gave us a target. As a member of the technology team, a member of the security team, you knew what your piece of this was, and you knew how to orient your activities against making Equifax a more secure environment. But it really gave us a message to deliver to our customers to say, hey, look, we're going to be fully transparent. This is where we started. This is where we're going, and you can share this journey with us, and we're going to report progress back on a regular basis so you can see we're not making this up. And I think that's where we got the most value out of those KPIs.
So Jason, I'll turn it over to you. So after the Kaseya security incident, can you talk a little bit about how employees viewed cybersecurity differently? Did you feel that engineers treated it a little bit differently than perhaps just other back office support staff?
Yeah, so let's answer that. So leaning on my experience as an FBI agent, you would see this natural tendency and progression to where everyone had security at the forefront of their mind, right? And then it would kind of dip off. Understanding that there's a human nature to just wane after a security event, it's my job as the CISO to ensure that it's top of mind, ensure that they understand, they, being everyone in the organizational, we will never be done securing the organization. This is a living, breathing task that has to be breathed into everything that we do in a security-first mindset and culture. So what does that mean? That means, one, doing it in a way that they understand. Like, for those of you, I can really geek out on like Monte Carlo simulation tables and showing a monetization, an actual number for the risk associated. I won't do that because I will see a lot of your eyes roll back, but that's part of it. The other part of it is, for me, I immediately, one of the first things I did was got an offensive security team to do our own in-house purple teaming. Because it's great to do external pen test and everything else, but there is nothing like having an actual offensive team that understands the product and and being able to bang at that product every single day. You can never argue with a document where this is what happened with the internal pen testers. And it's amazing how that alone helps move culture. But it's a continual education process, especially from the C-suites, to get their buy-in where every time that they're speaking, whether it's at a leadership function, whether it's an all-employees conference, whether it's conferences like this, to ensure that security is always added. That's how you get it to the forefront of everyone's mind. That's how you get it on the tip of everyone's tongue. And it's also having a robust education for the entirety of the organization so that they understand, even from a sales perspective, from the receptionist, everyone understands the risk associated with their job functions. Now that's going to be different for engineers, and we have a different program for engineers. We have real-time learning and capture the flag and various really robust education plans that we push out to them on a regular basis. And it's part of their metrics, and it goes into what they're rated on. But those are some of the things that you can do very easily to start becoming a security first, having a security first mindset within your organization. And it doesn't happen overnight, but you take that momentum, and before you know it, you've done exactly that. I would challenge you to go back and look at, all the presentations that our CEO has done, where he gives longer than a 30-minute speech. He always includes security. At every all-employees conference, he always has security top of mind. Security has made it into his top 3 things that, quote unquote, keeps him up at night. I don't know how to feel about that as the CISO now. I would like to think that I've done a better job at that, but no, those are the things that we want them to understand, the life-changing impact that a security event could have on the organization. And if they understand the ultimate impact, then we're going to treat it differently.
So Jason, I want to follow up to one of the points you made about just how things really change after a major security event. You tend to get a lot of buy-in from the business. You tend to get a lot of buy-in from folks that maybe didn't really feel like cybersecurity was one of their responsibilities. But all of a sudden, after a big event, people in the company, they find religion, and all of a sudden they really care about security. But that doesn't always last forever. It usually lasts for some period of time before the interest in cybersecurity starts to atrophy. And I've heard comments from certain organizations that I thought was kind of interesting, where certain CSOs said, we need to have a nice major security event so that we can start getting new funding and new focus on security events, or on our security program moving forward. So Tim, I want to ask you a question. How long can you defer back to the SolarWinds event to continue to keep your company focused on security? Or maybe not specific to you, but just in general. How far can you defer back?
So I think it's 2 different sides. Internally, right, I completely agree with Jason here on a rolling thunder campaign across security. And after an incident, your exec team is super in tune to security. And as long as that support keeps going and keeps going forever, it's not really referring back to the incident so much as just referring to culture. I'll give you a real example. So a couple months ago, we were doing a release. I wasn't happy with that release, so I stopped it. Right? A pen test came in late. I said there's stuff that needs to get fixed. So it wasn't a question. There wasn't grumbling around the company. It was maybe a little bit of, oh crap, I really didn't want to release, or I didn't want to delay. But it was full support across the company to do that. I just did a final security review of one of our solutions yesterday. It was squeaky clean. They said, well, we don't want you stopping our release. So there has to be little events that say, hey, we treat this seriously. We treat this seriously across the organization. And you have to have little triggers that do that. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a big event, but you do need to have reinforcement coming around on a regular basis.
So let's shift gears and let's talk about defending against ongoing attacks. After a security event, you tend to get a lot of free and unsolicited pen testing from security researchers as well as threat actors. And so Adam, I want to point to you. After the Colonial event, which obviously was so impactful, how do you think about defending against future attacks? And then, what are the threats that you're actively dealing with today?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. Anytime you have a major event, you get in the news, you attract a lot of attention, right? You get the well-meaning security researchers as well as the less well-meaning threat adversaries. I can say at Equifax, now at Colonial, you see an uptick in chatter out in the attacker forums and the criminal element, specifically asking to get access to your environment, specifically asking for credentials or other leverage. So that's always a little bit unnerving, but that's just the reality of the threat environment. The situation over in Ukraine has highlighted the impact of a pipeline to energy supply, and so that's something we're monitoring very closely. But really what it comes down to is following all the same principles that you would have applied otherwise, right? Layers of defense, continuous monitoring, continuous validation, managing your identities. It's not rocket science. But man, when you see your name showing up in criminal forums where they're actively looking for you, they're actively looking for your data or your credentials, it makes you realize that this is real. You got to stay sharp every day.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing how threat actors are offering money to pay for access into the Colonial pipeline network. Whether it's a real threat or not, just seeing that chatter out there is definitely pretty concerning. So let's shift gears and talk about board reporting. And Tim, I want to point to you. After the SolarWinds event, you guys established a technology and cybersecurity committee on your board of directors, which it's not a common thing for organizations, especially publicly traded companies, to have dedicated cybersecurity committees as part of their board of directors. So can you talk a bit about, why did you guys establish that?
Yeah.
What's the benefit? What do they want from you from a reporting perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at boards, they're often made up of different skill sets, different folks with a lot of financial skill sets, a lot of other skill sets. Cyber skill sets are not always present, or if they're present, they're kind of given secondary activities. So we thought it was very important to establish a separate committee within the board. We meet regularly, scheduled quarterly, but more often than that. We brief them on what risk we face as a company, because every company faces risk, right? Every company has risk. Nothing is perfect. So it's important that the board understands that. The board supports investment. The board supports different initiatives that we have. When we look at, we're a development company. We build a lot of products. So when we look at the choices that we make, the board weighs in on those choices. So it's not always economic decisions, it's security decisions. So it's a great counterpart or great advocate for me and a great check and balance for me and the board. So it's really worked well.
So Lisa, if I could ask you, how often do boards request an independent security audit or an investigation following a security breach?
It doesn't happen very often, but certainly after a very significant or high-profile event, it does happen. It also may be important for public companies to be able to put into their securities filings the sort of evidence that they had showed appropriate oversight over cybersecurity, and to do that, to indicate in your securities filings that you did an independent investigation is a positive thing. It's also potentially important in lawsuits because there are derivative actions that are filed after a major event, and the board is going to want to show that they provided appropriate oversight over cybersecurity. One thing that I just want to note, I think you might have mentioned it, Adam. After an event, the information security team is exhausted. They are absolutely spent. So to second guess decisions that were made, again, based on imperfect facts at the time, but may have been sound decisions at the time, is really a morale killer. So we already have a very fragile environment within the information security team after an event from a morale perspective. So you have to be super careful, really not to second guess, not to play Monday morning quarterback, but to understand the decisions that were made at the time based on the facts that were known at the time.
So Lisa, let's talk about congressional hearings and litigation. It's not that common for CEOs to have to be asked to testify before Congress after a security event, but coincidentally, 3 people on the stage have had their CEOs testifying before Congress after a major security event. So Lisa, how often do you think this is going to happen in the future where CEOs are going to be asked to testify? And then are CEOs the right people to testify? Should it be the CSO? Should it be somebody else?
Yeah, certainly there's heightened interest in Congress right now and has been over the last few years with respect to these events. So I think we can expect that there will be requests for testimony after high-profile events or events that affect a very significant number of people. Congress runs a little bit hot and cold depending on what else is going on in the world, but I don't think they're going to be losing interest in this issue anytime soon. So who is the right person to testify? It is not the person who has all of the gory technical details, so not these guys. It really is the CEO who has decision-making power over the entire organization, who sets the tone and sets the direction for cybersecurity over the entire organization. This is a very scary moment for CEOs, and they need to be coached a lot. But if a CEO does a good job testifying, they really have the opportunity to put the company on much more solid reputational footing if they do well in front of Congress.
And Lisa, let's talk a little bit about the litigation against CSOs. What should CSOs be doing to better protect themselves as the stakes get higher for CSOs out there?
There's obviously heightened concern now over liability for CSOs. This is an area that should not be overlooked. Certainly there is liability from a criminal perspective and there is liability from a regulatory perspective. The chairwoman of the FTC recently said that she intends to go after individuals and she wants to name individuals in FTC orders, make sure they are held responsible for the company's actions. So I think there's a real risk. It's a meaningful risk. What should CSOs be looking for? What they ought to make sure is that they will have appropriate funding to cover legal fees to the extent that's necessary. Legal fees can be very high in these instances. You need expert counsel, which means expensive counsel. So really good to work that out in advance. And also make sure that you are covered under the company's D&O coverage.
So I want to shift gears, and I want us to focus on some of the huge wins that we've seen over the past, say, 18 months or so. When I think back to the Colonial pipeline incident, irrespective of how impactful that was, something that was really interesting that came out of that was, for the first time ever, we saw law enforcement reclaim some of the extortion payment that the victim organization paid to the threat actor. And that sent a huge message across the community. Just a few months afterward, law enforcement also helped Kaseya recover the decryptor that the REvil group had generated and made that decryptor available to really any organization that was impacted. And so Jason, I'd like to ask you, you were at the Bureau at the time, you're now with Kaseya. I realize there's a lot of sensitivity around how the Bureau got access to the decryptor, but can you share with us whatever it is you're able to talk about?
Man, what happened to the softball questions? Come on. Out of left field. No. It's a very interesting story, and it's one that's only happened twice in my career with the FBI. So in 16 years, in the 1,000 of intrusions that I did, there were 2 times, and Kaseya was one of them, where the FBI was able to bring a set of decryption keys for victims. The first one, no one in this room will likely ever know about, and the second one's obviously Kaseya. What I can say about the Kaseya key that was obtained is that if it was not for collaboration and cooperation from Kaseya, that it is highly unlikely that critical information that ultimately led to the arrest and now conviction of the person that actually did the ransomware event and the activity would have been highly unlikely. Also, without the cooperation, I'm unsure that we would have been able, we, meaning the FBI when I was with them, to get the ransomware key, decryptor key, and provide that. Why do I tell you that? And I know that's not like earth-shaking or shattering news, but I tell you that because I still hear the debate today about whether or not do we cooperate with the authorities. And when I was with the FBI, I would always say if I could put a list of people on this screen or companies that the FBI has worked with in the past, you would not recognize any of them as being intruded upon, nor in the news, and that list alone would provide you the comfort to share information. So I tell you that today because even though it happened just twice, isn't it worth cooperating and telling someone on the off chance that you're the third time that it happens? And that's just my career. But there is a small percentage. What's a greater percentage in likelihood when you cooperate is that you get IOCs, indicators of compromise. That you basically get a potential roadmap for where the adversary is going to go in your network, what they're going to do, or backdoors or other things that they may have installed within your system that is going to help you with the remediation efforts. Now, don't get me wrong. The government will not come and remediate and provide the services that a company like Mandiant will. But they will provide you valuable information on the threat that no other entity, quite frankly, on the planet potentially has. That alone, to me, is worth a conversation.
Yeah, Jason, I mean, there have been some really good wins over the past 18 months, and I really think we got to celebrate that. So let's shift gears. Let's talk about improving public sentiment following a security incident. And, Lisa, I want to ask you the first question around, what's your position on CEOs apologizing after a security event? Does it help? Does it hurt? What do you think?
Apologies can be a lawyer's nightmare. So there's a way of apologizing without actually accepting culpability. So you can say, I'm sorry this happened, rather than, I'm sorry we had lax security protections in place that allowed this to happen. And there really is a huge benefit to sincere cooperation and disclosure to your business partners. So we can't forget about the business issues when we're protecting against legal risk. So there is certainly a way of doing it that allows you to have that sort of sincere response to your business partners, but also protects you from liability. So I would say the key is to make sure that you're involving legal counsel, involving your really expert PR folks who know this area. There's a lot of PR firms out there, but there are really very few who know this area very well. Make sure you're involving the experts in any public statements that you make, and you're apologizing for the fact that it has affected the other entity, if it has, or your business to the extent that it reflects your work with the other entity rather than the event itself.
Excellent. So Jason, can you talk a little bit about what Kaseya did during the event and following the event? And one thing that I found really interesting is you guys did a really good job of providing ongoing communications to your customers and partners for messages from your CEO, your CTO, and various other folks.
Yeah, to be quite frank, if they hadn't done such a good job, I wouldn't be sitting here. It's one of the things that got me to cross the line from federal service to now being in the private sector. I remember sitting there and having meetings with the CEO and COO, and then, quite frankly, 10, 15 minutes later, that same information that was being passed to the government was going up online. They were talking to their customers. They were giving them, real and honest information that they had. It's hard to do because, as Lisa points out, you may not have a full scope and picture at that time. And what I saw is that they were both heralded for it and crucified for it. Right? So there's a small group that no matter what you do will take to the forums and Reddit and say that the sky is falling and it's worse. But what I will tell you is we received much more accolades from our customers by being honest with the information that we had, by putting their mind at ease that there wasn't additional information than if we had done what other companies have done in the past, which is minimize. And that is the story here. There is not a silver bullet. There's not a silver bullet for communication. There's not a silver bullet for security tools. There's not a silver bullet. But you've got to be open and honest with what's going on so people can make decisions for themselves and their company. And that's what Kaseya did, and that's what we'll continue to do, both today, tomorrow, and in the future.
So Tim, just real quick, SolarWinds got beat up really bad in December 2020, and I realize that's probably the worst month of your career. But how did that impact business in December, and how does that translate to what business is like today?
Yeah, so as you said, it's kind of, you have to grow a real hard shell, right? Nobody in the world says anything nice about you for 4 months. Pressure kind of turns about 6 months. But our response was pretty direct. Our response was sharing as much as possible. Our response was customer-centric. And people truly loved our products, right? So with people truly loving our products, prior to the incident, we were at about a 93% renewal rate. Post-incident, went down into the 80s, back up into the 90s now. So, but I still have a conversation with a CISO probably once a week. And it's really just to give them comfort. We took it seriously. We did all of the remediation necessary. We're now exemplary. We're the safest bet in town. So when they see that, they are comfortable with moving forward. But again, you have to start with a product that folks love, that won't replace it just because they can. And with that, our general users just need enough cover to continue. And that's what we've seen.
Final question, 15 seconds each. What's one takeaway that you would give to the audience? Tim, we'll start with you. Yeah,
so quickly, just be open, be honest. The more that you share, the better. And just be prepared for long days, long nights that are going to happen. But you will get through it, and you'll be better for it.
Yeah, so communication, we've hit on it. There is no silver bullet. I said this when I thought that we might be winding down, but there is no silver bullet, whether it's in communication, whether it's in security tool set, and it's just being honest and understanding that you're going to be scrutinized regardless of what you do. And I would say communication spans the board, whether it's employees, whether it's public relations, and whatever that may be. Just you cannot over-communicate.
Prepare, prepare, and over-prepare. There is no substitute to bringing the team together in practice through tabletop exercises over and over and over again, playing out different scenarios. Make sure your team is well rehearsed. They build muscle memory, and keep your council very much involved. They will help to orchestrate this very difficult event with lots of different silos.
Yeah, that's good. To add to that, I'd say team. Team is everything. This can be a hard job at times, and it's so much better when you're there with people you trust, that you respect, and who've been in the trenches.
Excellent. Well, first of all, I learned a lot from all of you, so thank you so much for being here today, and we really appreciate everybody's time.